Okay, so behind me is the 2015 Enduro 29 Elite, which comes as stock with a Cane Creek double barrel inline shock. I've been riding it in the Forest of Dean lately, and it's been really quite impressed with it, to be honest. The main thing about the Cane Creek shocks, the double barrel, the coil, and the double barrel inline, the main thing is the adjustability. So you have low speed, high speed compression, as well as low and high speed rebound damping adjustment. So this might be quite intimidating to some people if you're not 100% sure of what all these things do and how you're gonna adjust them. But if you buy it stock on a bike, such as this Specialized, it comes set up with a bass tune, which is actually, unless you're unusually on the lighter or heavier end of the spectrum, that's going to be a really good bass tune to get going. And even if you did nothing at all, the way that this shock was set up for me was actually really quite good. Once I got riding, and once I'd set the sag, as you normally would with any air shock, all I did was adjusted the low and high speed rebound kind of in parallel until it felt right on the rebound stroke. And then I went riding and adjusted the low and high speed compression to stop it bottoming out on big hits or on kind of big G-outs. So for me, the tuning was more or less a case of riding the bike over the kind of terrain I like to ride it on, and I found a pretty severe G-out as the trail went from quite a steep descent onto a fire road, and I was finding that I was just about bottoming it out. So I added a little bit of low speed compression, just so those slower compressions in G-outs would be, it would have enough support for that, which obviously makes it a little bit firmer over the stutterier bumps. But you know, that's the trade-off that this shock allows you to make. A lot of other shocks I've found, because I'm maybe slightly heavier, more aggressive rider than average, I've found they just don't give enough support, and you're blowing through 80–90% of the travel when you're cornering hard, or if you hit a little G-out, and it can be quite off-putting when the back of the bike blows through the travel so eagerly. With this, you can tune it out, you can find the balance that's right for you and your riding style. It may well be that the shock is set up very well for you straight out the box if you buy it on a bike, or it may be that you just need to kind of experiment about a bit. Personally, I find that really fun. I think that's really an interesting kind of thing to do. So the next feature of this shock is the climb switch. A lot of shocks now have a pro pedal or a CTD or a climb switch or whatever you want to call it, which adds a huge amount of low speed compression at the flick of a switch to make it more efficient for climbing, so it bobs less. The unique thing about Cane Creek's approach to a climb switch is that they also add a load of low speed rebound damping. So if you can imagine, if you're out the saddle pedaling hard, the bike will want to bob through its travel. So they inhibit that with a bit of compression damping, but they also inhibit it with a lot of low speed rebound damping. So in both directions, it's stopped from moving fast enough to bob under pedaling forces. So this keeps it nice and efficient without having to have a completely locked out compression tune. So the advantage of this is that if you hit a bump on a technical climb, it will, rather than the rebound forcing you up, which causes you to lose traction, the rebound is so slow that it kind of sticks you to the ground. You're not kind of bucked up by the bump, and so it kind of maintains better traction on technical climbing, whilst also the extra efficiency of the slow rebound means that it doesn't have to have a really firm compression tune in order to get the efficiency. So you have a kind of slightly softer compression tune and a much slower rebound tune compared to, let's say, a Fox or RockShox with the climb mode on or with the Pro pedal on, which means you get much better traction, much more consistent traction on technical climbing. So this is not a replacement for the original Cane Creek double barrel air. This is obviously a little bit lighter and much smaller, so it fits in a wider variety of frames, particularly shorter travel frames. Also, if you want to run a water bottle in this bike, you're going to fit in a bigger water bottle with this shock as opposed to a double barrel air with a Piggyback. On the other hand, the advantage of the original shock is that Piggyback gives slightly better heat management. So the oil is allowed to cool inside the Piggyback. The heat is allowed to radiate out. Whereas this, although it has a much higher oil volume and much better heat management than pretty much any other non-Piggyback or inline shock on the market, it's not quite as good as the double barrel. So if you're wanting to do a really long downhill run, you will start to get more heat buildup with this shock, and that will cause the damping to kind of go askew. It'll cause the oil to get less viscous viscous, lighter, and that'll mean that your compression and rebound damping will become less effective. And so that's the real advantage of the original Cane Creek double barrel with the Piggyback, that it maintains the oil temperature much better over long downhill runs. So basically, the Cane Creek shock allows you to tune the shock for the characteristics that you want to get out of it. On the first ride, I had a bit of time to kind of experiment with it a bit. I got the support that I wanted from it, although I didn't have a huge amount of time to play about with lots of different settings, particularly with the rebound, the high-low speed rebound. So I'd quite like to experiment with that a bit more. It really does allow you to kind of get the full potential out of the bike, especially an aggressive bike like this, a longer travel bike. Right, so I look forward to riding it a bit more and getting those settings really dialed in, kind of experiment with it a bit more.